This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. With me as always, Ken Roybal. How are you, sir?
Hey, very, very good.
And how are you doing this Saturday morning?
You know what? I'm just cozy. It's a little overcast. I'm just got my sweatshirt on. I'm just, relaxing, just chilling because I've been so busy.
You're so snuggled.
4 weeks. And we just got extended till the end of the month. Mm-hmm.
Ooh, yes, you're on lockdown for now. You guys is it mandatory like face coverings in public and minimize travel and all that?
Not mandatory, but I mean, it's just, I'm just pretty much over it by now. I thought we were going to be able to loosen up, but apparently not.
Yeah, it's weird. It's different parts of California. Of course, California's huge, but I had to go for work. I had to go up north of Bakersfield, and I went into a Chipotle with my mask on, and nobody else had a mask on. And I was like, I asked the guy behind me, I'm like, is this you guys? He's like, no, you can if you want. I'm like, oh. Well, if you guys aren't doing it, I feel like an idiot. But
I went into
it was just weird.
Go ahead. I went into a couple of businesses, little farmers market type of vegetable place and a computer place, and I had to pick up some wires, some Cat 5 for my computer, and nobody was wearing masks. Nobody in there, and they were all sitting next to each other. The guy was talking to a customer at a desk, and I was the only one in there with a mask. I said, "Screw it, I'm going to do it." But I mean, there's not wearing masks, and then there's people that just flaunt the whole thing like it doesn't even exist. So I'm not even in the middle.
Right, gotcha. All right, sir. Can I tell you about our guest today?
Please.
This guy's a heavy hitter, baby. 21 plus years. NYPD. His name is Peter J. Pranzo, and let me just read some notes I took on him because. He's got a lot going on. He is currently doing consultations and advisory work for movies and TV. He has an IMDb you can look up. He's one of the most highly decorated superior officers in NYPD history. I don't know what superior officer means. Is that like a lieutenant and above?
That's like somebody from another planet.
Oh, gotcha. He's out of this world. And he was a cop this is what I'm most interested in. He was a cop in Brooklyn and Harlem in the 60s and 70s and had bounties placed on his head by the Black Liberation Army and the Gambino crime family, which is freaky. And while he was a cop, he also started writing for New York City newspapers and police magazines because he saw that the epidemic of police suicide and depression was starting to take over. So he's got a lot going on. He has 3 different books, one on stress management for law enforcement. It's been adopted into the FBI Academy Library. He's also has Behind the Shield, A Journey Through NYPD, and his latest book, Harlem Raiders. So, yeah, he's got a lot. And this is good, too, because it's like, you're LAPD, he's NYPD. You guys both think you're the best. That's it.
Yeah, so we can talk to him about that stuff. Yeah, he's been around for a while. He's a very accomplished individual. Sounds like he's one of those guys that has endless, boundless energy, and he's now now he's a little older, and he's still nonstop. I think he's going to just keep on keeping on.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing when I saw all the stuff that he's doing. I'm like, man, I can't wait to just do nothing.
Yeah, no doubt. I do this podcast and some other stuff. That's it.
Yeah, this is a lot.
It is. It's more than we can handle right now.
It is a lot of times. All right, I have him on standby. And I had a phone issue, as I've mentioned in the last podcast, I think, that I have a really awesome iPhone 10 that I've taken, like, perfect care of, Ken. It's in beautiful shape. It's been in a case the whole time. But the little lightning port is, like, worn out. It's broken. So, like, I used to bring guests in on that phone, and it worked beautifully, and now it won't even I had to buy a wireless charger for the thing, so I can't plug it into the mixer board. So I have my my backup phone here going, and I'm going to use it to call him in right now.
Cool.
Luckily, we can edit, and this will all seem like gravy. Here we go. Peter J. Pranzo, how are you, sir?
How are you? Who is this, Ken or Steve?
This is Steve Gould, and also is with us is Ken Roybal.
Hello, hello.
Oh, hello. How are you guys, Steve and Ken? It's a pleasure, and thank you for having me on. I appreciate that. I'm honored by it.
Oh, we're honored to have you, sir.
Yeah.
We were just going over your credentials here, and it's a lot, man. You accomplished a lot during your police career, and you keep on accomplishing things, which seems exhausting.
Yeah, we're running late because we were reading your.
Yeah, you know, when you when you got time on your hands, the older you get, the kids are out, grandkids are getting big. So my wife and I, we got some time on our hands, so we started writing and doing those kinds of things and keeping ourselves busy and try to play it forward a little bit. On behalf of the young people that are out there today in law enforcement,
I love it. I love the accent, Ken. We got a real New Yorker here. The friend of the show and former guest, Daniel Jerkowitz. He was actually a Brooklyn cop, I think, for 3 or 4 years before he went to the sheriff's. He was our first real New Yorker we had on, but you guys sound like you could be his dad.
That's terrific. Isn't it funny, right? No matter where you go, it says, they point to you and vice versa. It's pretty comical, but it's all fun,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's so funny, too. I grew up near Boston, and I never really got the accent. I was far enough away. But people always say, like, well, New York and Boston, they have the same accent. I'm like, no, they're way different. But to the West Coasters.
I can still hear I can hear it. I can hear a little Boston in you.
I told him that before.
I thought I avoided that.
I hear
it. All right, Peter. Man, where to start here? We're going to go all over the place, I'm sure, but I want to get some stories out of you, and then I want to talk about some of the stuff you're doing, some of the books you have out in your whatever project you're working on. But can you take us back? We were talking about here that you were a copper in the 60s and 70s in like Brooklyn and Harlem, and you dealt with all kinds of stuff. I mean, this was like one of the most dangerous places in the country at the time. So can you take us back and tell us about the first hot call you responded to as a young copper?
Yeah, I tell you, I came on at 21, so I was pretty young, and I didn't have any military training. My brother was in the service, so for me it was really unfamiliar territory, with the guns and the issue and the violence and such. I grew up on Long Island and kind of had a great childhood, sports and the whole deal. So when I got dropped into the city, I took the job. I was a construction worker. I says, no, that wasn't for me. I did that for a few years. And then I took the test for the NYPD, and then I got on the job. It was my lucky day to get on the job. It worked out well for me. But I was young. I was 21, and we didn't have much training because, a day after Martin Luther King, the day after I got on on April 3rd. On April 4th, Martin Luther King got shot. And I apologize. I didn't even know who he was. I tell you the truth. I heard of him, but I didn't know much about it.
Wow.
And they started breaking out some mini riots around the city and some disobedience, civil disobedience, and a little bit more. And so we got put out of the academy right away. Within 3 days, we were out for a couple of months. And I got put out. I was in Queens. We were in full uniform and, guns and the whole 9 yards with very little training, only a couple hours of weapon training. And my first hot run, I was lucky, they put you with some older guys and some real tough old characters, that came on in the 50s, late 40s and 50s. And I was lucky enough to work with one guy, Frankie Whalen, may he rest in peace, but a good, tough cop. And we went on a stick up in a bar in Queens. And that was my first issue. Shots fired. I didn't fire my gun, but the guy he stuck up a bar, and he had an accomplice outside parked in a car. And when we pulled up, we were the first car on the scene. It was a task force, and we pulled up first. And I heard boom, big, loud, like a cherry bomb, like an ash can firecracker went off. And the guy, he let off a shotgun round in the ceiling of the bar to get everybody's attention. And he took all their cash. And we waited outside, me and the matured cop, Frankie Whalen. And by the time he came out, and my guy told me, my partner at the time, the older guy, he said, listen, gun out, right? Finger off the trigger, put it on the side, your finger, get ready. If it goes down, you point and you pull that fucking trigger if it's okay. Excuse my language.
That's fine.
And I says, okay, will do. And I was nervous like a son of a gun, And the guy came out, and I didn't see the accomplice off to the side, parked in the car. I didn't know anybody, And so we got the guy quick enough. And my guy, we got him. He says, and he told me, go cuff him. And so car started pulling up, and my guy disappeared, my partner. And he went over, he got the sharp eyes, got the guy across the street from the bar, the accomplice. And without knowing a word, yanked him out of the car and got another 9mm or whatever gun out of it, just to show you about things that you know when you don't know. And that was a little, for me, that was my first experience. And I'm telling you, I only had maybe a month on the job, And from then, the violence, it came hot and heavy, of course. It was just the times, across the whole country. I'm not going to say just New York. It was busy. Chicago, Miami, LA. It was just a busy time, the late 60s and, of course, the 70s.
Wow, that's a great story, man. It sounds like a movie. The guy shoots the shotgun into the ceiling of the bar. I mean, it is astounding how training has changed, isn't it? I mean, the baptism by fire your generation went through, where you're hitting the road with hours instead of weeks of firearms training, and they pretty much put it on the shoulders of the veteran officers. Hey, you got this greenhorn, break them in. That's got to ratchet things up so much more than going through a 6 or 8 month academy. Like, when your nerves just must be on edge.
Yeah, it was true. The difference was from back then. Of course, it's busy today too. I tell the young people today, you can get hurt, you can get killed anywhere today, and you see what's happening around the country. But what happened was you learned on the fly, like you says, and it was different because people had no cameras. Our regulations were a lot more relaxed than they are with the young people today. They really have tough guidelines to go by, and we had not free reign, of course, but we had a lot of, we could do more, and nobody snapped the pictures at you and that kind of things. And other than the organized dissidents, the civil disobedience kind of thing, there were demonstrations every day across the country. And of course, New York was a center point with all the draft card burnings and the anti-war sentiment, and the shooting of Martin Luther King. And then, of course, in the 60s, you had the president get shot and the brother get shot and all that stuff. So it was that kind of organized disobedience across the country, and that added to the fire. And then, of course, the Black Liberation Army really took hold, and especially in New York, but it took hold all around the country, the BLA, and then we had to encounter those people. They were killing cops all around the country, especially in New York. They killed a few.
How do they differ from the Black Panthers, or are they connected somehow?
They're the same. So what happened was the Black Panthers, I think they started in Chicago, and the group of them, and then they sort of splintered off, and they had some inside issues amongst themselves, because when they started off the Black Panther Party, they were more of an inclusive party, and it was an anti-government group, and they did their shootings, and they killed people and they killed police officers and the like. They had a few wild people in there, but then they had a splinter group from them was the BLA, and the BLA, the Black Liberation Army, with Joanne Chesimard and Twyman Myers and a few of the other characters, and she's still out there today in Cuba. But they were a vicious, vicious group, and that's why they had to go off on their own. And the BLA was really a tough group of killers, killing black and white teams whenever they had a white and they didn't like the whites working with the blacks and the cops working together. So they targeted a few of those, including a couple of my friends. And they shot a few of them up in Manhattan and around the country, of course. But that was a tough group, the BLA. And that went on for a few years. Geez, we chased them around for about, I think, 4 or 5 years. And of course, later on, she absconded to Joanne Chesmer, wound up in Cuba. She escaped. We almost had her a couple of times in the city later on in my career. And then the feds almost had her, and then they had her, they lost her, all that kind of nonsense. She killed the Jersey trooper, and then they had her really tight, and she was going away for her lifetime. And then she escaped somehow. I don't know. And she fucking went on to Cuba, and that's where she is now, you know. Protected.
What's the problem with
figure that one out, right?
What's the problem with bringing her back? What's the big pushback on that?
Yeah, I guess what do they call that? Extradition and bringing people back. I guess there's legal issues involved, and because the New York Police Department, Jersey, and the people that were involved in it have been pushing forever. And, I hate to play that political football game. I try to stay away from that. But however, it's going to take somebody to step up to the plate. They would think it may be President Trump this time. I don't know, that could, hey, forget about the relations to Cuba. You turn over Joanne Chesimard. I don't care how old she is, what you want to do with her. But she was a cold stone killer, and she did some bad things, and she became a bit of a folklore hero amongst a lot of the younger people, and she remained that way today. And there's so many rumors around that politicians went to see her. I don't know. You read all about that nonsense. However, that's where she is today, supposedly, and I understand people who are in the know that know exactly where she is, but they can't go ahead and take her back, without the legal issues being the hurdles being overcome.
Yeah.
Wow. The now they put a contract on you, right? A hit.
Yeah, what happened was, was so many things going on. That was later on in my career, but early on in my career, we were watching I was sitting on a fixed post with my partner in West Harlem. This was not the 3-2, it was West Harlem, which wasn't as bad as Central Harlem, busy as I should say as Central Harlem. And we were there, and we went to meal, and they were targeting us, not because of just me at that time. It was just myself and my partner. We were young, only had a couple of years on the job. I think that was 1971, and in May. And then the BLA was setting us up for a hit, so to speak, because it was a fixed post 24 hours a day, because they threatened to kill the DA Hogan, who was doing all the working the cases, all the BLA cases and such. And what happened was we went to meal, and they took over the spot. Along comes the BLA, and they machine gunned Tom Curry and Nick Benetti, good friends of mine, put a bunch, 15, 16 rounds through the side of the door, went through both of them and out the other side of the door. I mean, what the coincidence was, we were just coming back from meal, and I heard the radio come over the radio. He says, we're shot. And I said, Jesus Christ. I said, that sounds like Tom and Nick. And then we went over, and I tell you the truth that, I was young. I only had a few years on the job. And the doors were open on the radio car. The windows were all smashed. And one of them was hanging out the car. I to myself, I'm thinking, this is a car accident. Or did somebody ram the car? And then as soon as we got out of the car, I saw all the bullet holes in the car, the windows knocked out. And I saw the holes through both of them, the guys, the big bullet holes. And of course, no bulletproof vest, which for Tom would have made no difference because he took a lot of hits to the face, and he was dead at the time. And then they brought him back to life in St. Luke's, and I took Nick Benetti. Another car took Tom into the hospital, and I took Nick Benetti, and I had him in the back of the car. My guy was driving, my partner, and we took him to St. Luke's, and his eyes were rolling back, and I'm putting my fingers, I didn't know what to do. So I put my fingers in the bullet holes trying to stop the bleeding because it was bubbling out, And he was a big guy. He weighed like 240, 250. And they, luckily they just saved him, but they lost their inside organs. Tom lost all his teeth, a piece of his spine, Tom Curry. It was terrible, So that was my real first experience. I only had a few years on the job of police officers getting shot. And then after that, things went downhill, so to speak. It got busier, And then later on, when I was up in the Central Harlem in the 32nd Precinct, I was a young sergeant. And then we were hitting them hard with narcotics enforcement, really hard. I had a bunch of, I had one of the first diverse teams in New York City history, black, white, Spanish cops involved. That's because that's the only way you could do it. And we took, literally thousands of people off the streets and the buildings, in the burnt out buildings and stuff, all the drug dealers and the junkies. And we took some heavy hitter dealers off the street too, doing observations and that kind of a thing. But, Carlos Gambino, the Gambino crime family, put a contract out on me, I don't know, for $36,000. I thought it was worth more, I guess not. But a contract on me and my guys, my family, the whole 9 yards. So things got a little murky,
Holy cow, Peter, that is intense. That almost sounds like, I've heard about New York being like this, but back in the day, but it sounds like a war. That must have putting your fingers in the bullet hole and trying to stop the bleeding. That must have really changed how you felt about the whole thing. What did that do to you mentally? You must have been like, it's sad. You must have been angry. Did that really light a fire under you to get these bastards?
Yeah, you really want to work, but what happens after? It was so commonplace. I think a couple of weeks after that, they shot Joe Piangentini and Waverly Jones in the 3-2. They killed them, black and white team. They killed them, and they went downtown and killed two other cops in cold blood, another black and white team. So it was so commonplace, and we went to funerals like every week. We were going to funerals, that was mandatory. Everybody had to go. They wanted 10,000 cops at every funeral. So we had to get in uniform and do it. So you really had no time to take it all in or to think about it. And it was frazzling. And every night I had to, because you were working with so many different shootings all over the place. And for the people in uniform, and at a time, for my first 8 or 10 years, I was mostly in uniform. And you had to bring the uniforms home full of blood. It was a tough time. But we didn't know any better. We didn't know anything different. So this was the job. When people say, geez, you went through that. How could you? And how did you survive and everything else? And I said, nope. I says, it's just like I tell you, we're no different. We are no different. Any of the cops who worked back then, it's just where God put you. It's where you were. And for survival, to keep your job and to try to get ahead a little bit on the job, to stay alive, survival, and to serve the people. The good people, So it was just part of the job. And I would say that to the young people today. Anybody today would do the same thing that all the older guys did back in the day, and they're doing it today. A lot of them are getting heavily involved. They're doing good work, and they're getting hurt and shot and killed and everything else. So it's just where you are, where you were put, and that we're all the same. That's it. We all did do the same thing, would do the same thing, and are doing the same thing today.
Sure. Yeah, it seems like a lot of it's perspective. I've heard people say that before that worked in the 60s and 70s, that the it wasn't people nowadays like, oh, it's so terrible, cops are being killed like crazy and all these things, but the media covers it a lot more and hypes it a lot more, and it's a whole different animal. But their point is, it was like this in the 60s and 70s. It was, it was insane in Chicago and New York and LA, all the big cities. It was just as nuts. It's just I don't know if that if we forget or if it wasn't so readily reported on or what. But wow, like you say, there was less less ways to be heard and seen when you were doing your job, and there wasn't a recorder on every phone and all that stuff.
Yeah, you know what it was also, Steve. It was a lot of anti-cop sentiment back then, and anti-government, because the police back then, law enforcement, they were the hands of the government. So everybody hated the government. There was a lot of anti-government rhetoric. And by that, there were so many demonstrations for everything, the war and poverty and everything else. And so it was really, and it was a lot of racial divisiveness, and a lot worse than it is today, a lot worse. But with social media today, and the people really do cherish their law enforcement folks. That's all I can tell you. It's a big difference. Back then, people were like, they sort of looked the other way, and that was only happening in big cities, like you say, LA, Chicago, Miami, and New York, and some up in Boston too, of course. And so it was only to big cities, and people, they turned a blind eye towards it, But now today, it's rah-rah law enforcement. I see it. I write about it, and all the Facebook pages and things and everything. And people say, God bless you, God bless you. So it changed, and I'm glad of it. I'm happy for the younger people, and they got their work cut out. That's for sure.
Absolutely. It's like a Vietnam versus World War II veteran type of thing, where they're getting way more support now, But yeah, in the 70s, man, my dad tells a story about he was a cop for over 30 years, and they couldn't get cops. It was like not a popular job. Like a lot of people apply now to be police officers, you get a lot of applicants, but back in the day, they were like they were begging people to come on the job. It seems like probably
true. We had
climate.
walk-in exams. Yeah, we had walk-in exams on any given Saturday, like so many Saturdays during the year. You could just walk into a high school, and they could give you the police exam, and because they needed cops. A lot of the old guys were bailing out. They says, I'm out of here. Anybody with over 20 years on the job who came on in the 40s and 50s and such, they were gone. They says, I'm out of here. They didn't sign up for that shit. It was terrible, And a lot of guys who were on they says, that's it. You guys, God bless you. This is a different job, and a lot of them did retire. So they needed, and then we only had maybe 20,000 cops on the job in New York, 22,000, whatever. So their goal was to get over 30,000 right away. They had to go, we went to over 30,000 guys. So I think they hired 10,000 guys in a couple of years, 10,000 kids, and a lot of Vietnam veterans, and then what happened was, you had that height requirement. So, it's sort of, they were kind of stringent, not only with the height requirement, the health and background checks, of course, so and anybody, if you're separated from your wife or divorced, if you got any shaky past, a misdemeanor, you were out, and then guys, I felt so bad for the veterans because they were heroes, war heroes, and they were a half inch shy. I said, you kidding me? So I'm glad they changed that a few years later. They took out the height requirement, and that sort of changed things around. They gave veterans more of a chance,
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. The Mass State Police was famous for that. You can be a trooper in Massachusetts as long as you're 6 foot and a Marine. That was kind of like their, it made for a very imposing police force. But wasn't very fair at all. So they changed their requirements as well.
Yep, that's very, very true. And what happened was they had not only we had no women on the job, no females. So I think around they only had matrons, they called them, that were specialized, and just a handful, because we needed a lot of them to it's a shame to say, to do the searches, to handle the female prisoners, and when you made the arrest and such like that. But then, of course, that wasn't fair either. And then they brought them on, I think around 1975 or 76. They started bringing some of the females onto the job, and they were grabbed up right away, quick for the special assignments, and because you needed them,
Sure. And did they have to wear dresses
and that
back
changed the
then?
job too. I'm sorry?
When did they stop? Like, it's fascinating to me that female police officers had to wear they wore
dresses and high
for
heels.
a while. Seems like so counterproductive to police work. You'll make sure you wear your dress and like the boa around your neck or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, those, I think they were matrons, back in the day. And that was like early, and they did a limited amount of work. And but then of course the job changed, with all the rights and the civil rights and all that good stuff. But what happened is that then, and they changed the job, and they really they got put to the test. The cops, the job. So the guys could be pretty wild, and so they had their hand. The female police officers, God bless them, when they first started, they had their hands full. Probably today as well, I'm sure, but back in the day, they had their hands full.
Oh yeah, we had Lindy Gogorovich was on. She's a co-worker of Ken's from LAPD, and she came in on in the 80s, Ken?
Yeah, she was not too long after me.
And she got put through the ringer. I mean, she was a tough cookie though. She had the right frame of mind for it. She has some funny stories, but yeah, even then the guys were brutal, really kind of testing you to see if you're going to be welcomed in,
Yeah, but the women back then weren't they weren't very thin-skinned either. They could take it and they could shove it right back in their faces, and they're just all part of one squad. It wasn't male-female.
Yeah, it's like that guy. There was the guy at the cooler that Lindy saw, and he said, "Hey, what's going on? I heard you're having sex with everybody in the precinct, but what's going on? You haven't had sex with me yet." She's like, "Oh, I'm doing it alphabetically." And I guess he had like a Z for last name.
Yeah. Oh God, those are just such mild stories. The real stories. It got crazy.
Oh yeah.
And the girls sucked it up because what are you going to do? Say, hey, calling names, this and that, hitting on the girls, and it just got wild, and posters put up and jokes in the bathrooms and all that stuff. So there was a lot of and a lot of the guys, and when I really never really had the opportunity until I got to Central Home, the 32nd Precinct, as a sergeant. So we only had a couple of females, and so I told the guys, just be careful. I told, please, guys, don't lose your job over this. Number one. Number two, don't show off to the woman, and the woman, I told them the same thing when they were on patrol. I says, don't show off to the guys. So don't take that extra whack at somebody, and believe me, you're talking to a guy that took a lot of extra whacks, But the idea is, I tell them, don't try to hold yourself back from showing off and trying to be tougher than necessary. Grab, push, pull, roll them, cuff them, and done. Because and even like today, they got to be so careful. You can wrestle, you could roll, but of course, the people in the crowd never really liked it. And I'm talking about when I first came on the job until today, especially in the minority communities, So you're taking those extra shots to the face or to the head. You're issuing that, and you're talking to a guy who did all that. I'm sure you guys, were involved in those kind of things yourselves. But and I used to tell it. First of all, 90% of the time, it does nothing to the perp, the guy you got. They laugh it off. They could take 50 hits to the head. It just doesn't. So roll them, cuff them, do what you got to do, fast, and get them out of there. Don't let the crowd, just take them and put them in the back of the car and go before the crowd can get, it gets too a little wild, Don't stand there with them, because a lot of the young people, they go into shock a little bit. So after they collar the guy, they're standing around, they're talking. And I said, tell them, I said, no, get out of here. Get them in the fucking car, excuse my language, and get them out of here. Go to the precinct, We'll clean up, we'll fix up, we'll do the investigations later, But so it was a bit of a touchy situation, and when the different groups of people, the cops who didn't know each other, or females against the guys who would want to show off to one another. So there was a lot of things that popped up with the different races of the officers. And then, of course, the same with the the black and white cops, the same issue. When you're working in Harlem or Brooklyn or whatever, you're working in Boston or LA, Chicago, whatever you're working, everybody comes onto the job with the little bit of racial situations. They harbor their own feelings. Of course, it's just normal. Maybe the way you were brought up,
sure.
Maybe the way the feelings over the years. So you got to eliminate that. And I try to tell them, take those bad words out of your mouth. They're gone. You're done. No matter what happens, they're gone, and you're all blue. And that connects to tell the black guys that, Spanish, white guys, hey, it's a blue team now. You got to work together. And they became very good friends, most of them now. They all went home into different areas, different parts of the city, different parts of the suburbs. And we live different maybe, and we have different lives maybe, and different schools. But when we're doing those 8, 10, 12 hours together, we're the same. We're brothers in blue, and man, you got to stick up for each other, because I'm telling you, I work with some tough black and Spanish cops, and I was an scrappy Italian kid. But let me tell you, these guys were tough guys, because a lot of them grew up in the areas I never saw before. And I'm telling you, they impressed me, and they saved my life on a few occasions. One in particular, Bobby Smith, saved my life. We got into a shooting up in central Harlem, and he jumped in front of me, and the guy was bailing out of a window in a burnt out building, and they got into a close combat shootout, and he jumps in front of me, pushes me out of the way, and starts shooting back and forth with this guy, and nobody got hit. And so we're chasing him, and then I went one way up to try to cut them off, and I got there first, and I managed to shoot the guy, and he went down, and we high-fived on the street and everything. He saved my life. I saved his. I mean, this was something that, we were brothers, and we got medals together on Medal Day, and the team effort, the narcotics team that I had up in Central Harlem. So, it was one big blue team like it is today,
There's nothing like high stress like that to really bond a department too. You guys are going to war together every day. You're really forging some friendships and brotherhood there that last a lifetime for sure.
Yes, exactly. Even till today.
Peter, I am very curious about, and everybody is, about the Gambino family. What is it like dealing with these mobsters? We have this preconceived notion that they're like, they're polished, they're wearing nice suits, they kind of play nice with the police when you interview them, but really they're sinister behind the scenes. Is it anything like that? What is it like dealing with these guys?
Well, what it was, it's in my latest book, Harlem Raiders, which is about the narcotics team that I had up in Central Harlem back in the 70s and the early 80s, and I talk about the mobsters in there and such. And what it was, the heads of the families very rarely touched narcotics themselves. They didn't. And then their soldiers beneath them, they controlled different parts of the city. And their main thing was to make sure that there was enough supply of narcotics to the people in the communities, mostly minority communities, unfortunately, back then. Today it's everywhere. But heroin was the drug of choice. But the mafia families, especially in New York and Chicago and such, and probably in Boston as well, they very rarely touched the material themselves. But what they did do, they had the connections to bring the drugs into America. They had the connections from bringing it to, say, from Turkey, most of the stuff that I wrote about, the poppy fields in Turkey, and they brought it from there and down to the port of Mersin, and they shipped it over to Palermo, Sicily, and they had it all bundled up, and they put it on olive boats, and they'd send it to America, to the Fulton Fish Market, and from there they'd send it to the Bronx, New York, and then they'd have it all distributed, put it into diamond quarter bags, the glassines, ready for the street sale, and then they would give it to the, and that was all they did was they brought it to America. From there, they had their gang people, they're drug lords, sort of people who control the streets and the avenues around the city, the busiest parts of the city. They handled the narcotics on the street. So the mafia, what they did, had the international connection, which of course most of your mopes, your drug dealers, even the major drug dealers had no way of getting the drugs over to the raw opium and mixing and the chemistry work and getting into the powdered form, into heroin. So
Peter, is
the
this
mafia
like
people?
Sorry to interrupt you, but this is, you're saying they have the connections. Is this like when you see movies like The Longshoremen playing cards at the docks? Like, these are the people they know. They know the people that import goods, right?
Got it.
Okay.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. They stayed out of the way, of course, handling the narcotics themselves, of course, but they put up the money, and they made a ton of money. Every few blocks, they were making millions of dollars a year on it. And back then, like, the glassines of heroin, a couple of hits you get out of a glassine was $10. Quarter bag, you get 5-6 hits out of it, $25. And my understanding today, from when I talk to the people, the stuff coming from Mexico is so cheap. It's cheaper than marijuana. I mean, $3 a bag, a glassine or something coming from Mexico, to give you the idea. So why get pay $3 for or $5 for a marijuana hit when you can get a better high? You get the heroin hit, for the people who are more adventurous, for the same money. So that's how it is today. Back then it was more, you had to pay more money. And today the hits are even more dangerous than they were back then. The Harlem hits back then were dangerous. Today, the hits they're mixed with the fentanyl, the extra juice they got in there. So it's deadly shit,
Yeah, absolutely. So that's accurate in the movies you see then about the mafia, where they kind of poo-poo the drugs themselves and actually ban their capos and their leaders from doing that stuff and kind of look down on it, but they have no problem pushing it on the impoverished communities.
Yeah, that was the whole thing in my book, was because they used the pawns, the Harlem people especially, and back in the 70s and 80s, when the heroin really, really took hold, it was the drug central. It was for America, Harlem was the central area for the selling of heroin. People came from all around, states around. They came from Massachusetts to get the good, strong stuff, and then they'd beat it down, mix it up a little bit, lighten it up, and take it back home. So they used to buy their quarter bags and dime bags, big bundles of them, and go back home and send it to the suburbs and everything else. And that's when it started to spread so far out that they put a stop to it. When we put a stop to it, so to speak, the old narc cops from years back, all the old jump teams and SNU teams, special narcotics enforcement teams, the DEA. We work with some good undercovers in the DEA and the organized crime control units doing buy and sells and that kind of stuff. There were so many different enforcement efforts, and we put a stop to it. And then here it comes. It's back again. And that's how it is today. The higher heroin making a comeback because of Mexico, and they're coming in hot and heavy, and it's hard, to stop it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're dealing with the Gambinos back then, you're not seeing them on the street. You're not dealing directly with them. They're very much almost like paper pushers in this whole thing. They're given the funds. They're using their money to make money, but they're not out there. I mean, where's the disconnection from them? Is there, you know what I mean? There's not, are they using like black street gangs to get this stuff out, or are they just selling it to them?
Yes, that's exactly. They're using the black street gangs to do the selling, and the toughest of the black street gangs would kill off the weaker ones, and he would take over a whole area of, let's say, Harlem or the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and in Brooklyn and Bronx and such, and that's what it was. All they did was supply it. Of course, they didn't go out there. They didn't go out there selling. Any of them mafia people, they wouldn't touch it themselves. And so the disconnect was, we didn't see them riding up and down the street checking out the locations and making sure everything is okay.
Sure.
They just had their people, and as long as they were selling, they wouldn't care. And the murder rate was so high. The blacks and the Spanish, they were killing each other off for territory, and they wouldn't care. They didn't care how many bodies they had, as long as they sold the drugs. That was their main thing. And they were making more money, they would make more money in 1 month than 3, 4, 5 years of gambling money. They were into the gambling, the numbers money, and all the other stuff. That's where the mob really made their money, was gambling, until the narcotics came in the late 60s and 70s, and then they made a ton of money. That was their main thing, and all those, and they were killers. They would kill each other off, the mobsters, the Italian mafias and Sicilian mafia people. And they were fighting all the time. And that story is from years back. They were ruthless people but then when it came time for the big money, 60s, 70s, and 80s, man, I'm telling you something. They were ruthless amongst themselves, the mafia people, and then the black and the Spanish drug gangs. Man, we had bodies all over the precincts. I can't tell you. It was probably similar today when they got the virus. The bodies all over the place, which is terrible.
Sure.
This is the way it was. They were all over the streets. All day, every day. All around the clock.
Did you ever kick in the back room of like an Italian restaurant and do a raid on a bunch of like Italian guys slurping pasta with like Tommy guns lying around, anything like that?
Nope.
Like Sopranos.
No. But you know what happened was that the people we work with, in all honesty, we work with some good undercovers, organized crime people, heavy undercover hitters, undercovers from the NYPD, and they had some good task force, and they had the DEA people, and these people would really infiltrate the mob, and they would, in America, and the DEA gave the right to do the international under the law they passed years ago, so the DEA could go anywhere they wanted, and they followed the drugs back. And they made some good heavy arrests, and they put a kibosh on it, and it was well done for back in the day. I'm telling you, the enforcement tactics were very good, and today, of course, they're really top notch. Today, they really got people who are infiltrating the Mexican drug gangs, the Sinaloa cartels, and such like that. They're infiltrating them. They know what's going on. Of course, it's expensive for law enforcement, and to get it accomplished is not such an easy thing, but they're doing a good job. I have to say, the people I talk with and what I see, they're doing a great job.
Wow. That's awesome, man. That's crazy. Do you have a most bizarre or strange thing you dealt with on the job?
I don't, there's so many, I always said that police work, law enforcement, it can be the most deadly and serious thing, but it could be the most comical thing. The guys are always and the more time you have in the job, the guys are very sarcastic. So I want people to understand, what I tell folks, and, if I would make a speech or something like that, cops laugh. I'm telling you, they get upset and they do things out there, but amongst themselves, I always tell them, keep it amongst yourselves. They're very cynical. We had so many cynical things that happened. When I was on I was in the 32nd precinct, and I had covered patrol, before I went into my narcotics team. But when I was covering patrol, we had the East River there, that went from downtown Manhattan, Statue of Liberty, all the way uptown past Harlem. So we always had, whether they dump bodies, they kill people, they dump them in the East River, or you had suicide people fall off boats, whatever it was, we always had a lot of floaters. The dead bodies would float, and the currents would take it from downtown uptown. And we would stand there, and they said there's a floater in the water, and you would go down the river, and you would drive your car down there, and precincts were close together. And you would stand there and say, wait Don't touch that fucking body. Let it call harbor, because the body would float out of your precinct, your jurisdiction, and it would go all the way uptown. It would just and we'd stand there and say, okay, it's gone, it's uptown, it's out of my precinct, So those kinds of things. So, the precincts always worked together. We always crossed boundaries. You always responded on the, runs and whatever had to be done between precincts. But the boundary line with the bodies, the homicides, exactly where it was, where a street was the middle of one side of the street to the other, and there's so many stories that went on about that. I always found that to be comical, but as terrible as it sounds.
Dragging bodies around. That looks like it's your problem.
Yeah, exactly what it was. This is not ours. Let's get out of here, Call up, get him over here. This is theirs, not ours, because these things lead to hours and hours of paperwork, for the bosses and the cops,
Yeah, nobody wants that noise. Absolutely. Peter, do you have you have a very full career here, but do you have something in your mind that stands out as like the most intense thing you dealt with?
I would have to say, the law enforcement people getting shot. And unfortunately, when I was working, and even today, I should say, I never want to take away anything to the young people today, but, I would have to say with the incident where my guys got shot and Tom Curry, Nick Benetti got shot, and I've seen, that you always respond to those situations, and that bothered me the most. And children, children getting caught in the crossfire, shot, car accidents, and those kinds of things. It bothered me the most. You sort of relate that to your family, and that, to me, that type of a situation was probably the most intense. Now, I was involved in shootouts, of course, and but that bothered me less than pulling up on a job where a cop was shot, or a cop was shot and killed and stabbed, or whatever the heck the deal was. That hurt the worst, or where a child was killed in a crossfire, or young Spanish or black kids got shot at 10, 12 years old, by somebody else. They were yowers. We called them yowers. When the police would come, they'd stand on the corner, and for a few dollars they would call when the police came down the streets. But and they would get shot a lot by people who wanted to be there, and so those kinds of things bother me more. Children and other police officers and getting shot and killed, that bothered me the most. Oh yeah, absolutely.
New York is so densely populated, obviously, but like I have a buddy I go to visit sometimes. He lives in Greenpoint, and he takes me all over, and a lot of these neighborhoods where you were getting in shootouts and horrible things were happening are now like really gentrified. There's like, it's skinny white dudes with wool hats drinking $10 coffees walking everywhere, but it's packed there. Like, it's every borough you go to, there's people on top of each other. So I can only imagine if you're talking about all these shootings, there must have been people shot constantly who weren't involved, just for the sheer numbers of people out and about, right?
Yeah. What happened, there was a lot of crossfire incidents and a lot of cops getting shot in crossfire, of course. And like you said, today it's, my God, you run around to the worst neighborhoods. I call them the worst, the highest crime neighborhoods that were back in the day, and they cleaned it up great. Where the old people went, where the old Spanish and the old blacks went, they just drifted off. I don't know, because like you said, it's all the new folks, the new kids coming in, the Generation X, whatever the heck they call them, and it just changed. And when you talk about how much devastation there was, it was just horrible. That when you would come to work and you would leave, I lived, and a lot of the cops lived in the suburbs, and some lived in the better areas in the city, the safer areas in the city. Most of the cops back then. But when you came over the bridges and you had to get into the city and you got into the busy neighborhoods where you worked, it was eye-opening, It was just unbelievable. it was, you went on vacation for a week or two, and then you come back, you say, oh my God, what am I doing? You say to yourself, but you roll back into it right away, And like I tell people, how did you do? Why is that? It's a job. People walk on steel beams, and say, why would you do something like that? Or a fireman going into a fire. I don't like running inside fires. And they go in first. They go up on the roof. They fight from inside out. So it's the same thing. It's where you are. It's a job. You raise your family and you go on with your life. You do the best you can, and that's it.
Absolutely. Now, looking at New York City, and I love the place. I love visiting there. But it seems like it was incredibly violent for like a long ass time, like 60s, 70s. I remember the 80s when I was a kid. I remember like there were stories of just like if you rode the subway, you'd get stabbed. And then when did it? So to me, it looks like 30 years of like pretty dangerous place. When did it start to turn the corner?
Yeah. I have to tell you, I would have to say probably the 90s. They say to give Mayor Giuliani a lot of credit. When he came into being, he was the DA for the feds and stuff like that. So he was a law and order guy. And what happened was you had to say, because they saw what we did, and we made 8,000 arrests, my narcotics team. So they saw what worked. Crime went down. We cleared the streets. We cleared the buildings. It did work. So they know that enforcement works. Do you want to load up the prisons? Do you want to take thousands of people off the streets? And they did in the 90s. And it did work. So what happened was that, and that sort of changed the city. A lot of the old bad guys got old and died. They drifted off. A better education system. So by the 2000, it changed. The city really started to change. From arrest, law enforcement, education, better race relations all around. There's always those things that go on, of course, but things did change.
Got it.
Hey, Peter, I got a couple questions for you.
Sure can. Yep.
Tell us about stop and frisk and what's the big controversy over it.
Okay, and we did that a lot. I have to tell you, that was our forte. I make a little joke. We had a jump team. That my people, 8 guys in a group or 10 cops in a group, a few cars. And when I say that, is you stop the cars, whether unmarked cars, radio cars, and you stop and you get out, you jump out, and you put the people against the wall, and you give them a toss, and you come up with drugs. But it's not so easy. What we did, and I explained to people about the stop and frisk. You really have to target the locations. So you have to have it spelled out with the district attorney's office. You have to work hand in hand with prosecution. So you can't just take everybody in your precinct, put them against the wall, and start tossing everybody. And so you have to have targets set up, and you have zones set up. So these are the streets you're going to do. These are the corners you're going to do. You have to issue warnings. And you're talking to a guy that didn't do a lot of warnings, but this is the way it was supposed to be done, and we got better at it. So you give the warnings out. I don't want you on the street. You can't hang here on the street. And you warn the 30, 40, 50, 80 people, 100 people and more on the street. You guys, you're done. Right? Your little drug trade is done. You're not going to hang here. You're not going to loiter here. You're not going to drink, gamble, whatever you're going to do. Hanging on the street is not going to be anymore on these streets, because the people who live in those buildings, they don't want you here. So that kind of a situation. And when we talk about, so we really came into the being of stop and frisk, and it's not stop and frisk. Of course, we know you have to explain it. It's stop. It's designed for stop, question, and frisk. And not just stop. So if you go out, you're jumping out of the car because the guy's got a gun, or you see the guy hand a glassine or a hypodermic syringe or a gun or a big knife or whatever the hell it is, you get out of the car and you lock him up. No questions asked. That's not stop, question, and frisk. That's just a collar. You get out of the car and you jump and you take him, right? And because you thought you saw a gun, whatever the situation, you tell the DA, let me tell you, his jacket opened up. I saw a bulge. He adjusted it. That's not a stop and frisk. That's a collar. because I see a gun. I see the handle of a gun, So, but stop, question, and frisk it was done. I think they did like I don't know, a million of them or 500,000 before the year 2000 in 1 year. They were just stopping people on and questioning them. What are you doing here? You can't be here. What are you doing here? Get out of here. That kind of a situation. And if you stopped them and you gave you the right to question them, and when you questioned them and you didn't like, and you were concerned for your safety, and you thought they had a weapon, not drugs, you thought they had a weapon, that gave you the right, after you stopped them, you questioned them, to pat them down. So it's not going inside the pockets and pulling out a handful of drugs. It's going feeling for a weapon. From there, you feel for a weapon, you check. And when you question them, you could question them. I'm not going to get stuck. You have any syringes in your pockets? You got any of this? You got any weapons? No, I got a knife in my rear. It's a switchblade. Well, I got this. Well, officer, I got this or that. I said, don't let me find anything on you. And that kind of a talk. So that's the stop, question, and frisk, the way it was supposed to be done. The way they have it portrayed in the media is just that everybody's just against the wall. It's a stop and right to the frisk. Okay. And you're going inside right away. Now, and I always tell the young cops, first of all, safety comes first. If you feel unsafe, forget the stop, question, and frisk and all that shit. You unbutton his jacket and you reach in and look for the gun because you're afraid for your personal safety. So if a guy is dancing on the street with you and you got him against the wall and you look at him and you get to know the situations, you go in and open his fucking jacket up and go in and you check him. Then you tell the DA whatever you want to tell the DA. When you go downtown, you write up your arrest. You tell him the truth. I felt uneasy. He was doing this with his hands and so on. So I thought he had a gun. I went in and he had 3 bundles of narcotics. Now, if he wants to throw the case out, God bless him. Throw the case out. But you went in there with safety on your mind. That's what it's for. Stop, question, and frisk. It's to clean the streets, safety for the officers, and that's what you use it for. So, it just got a bad rap, and it was one of the major tools for law enforcement, especially in the busy areas.
Well, and my other question, thank you for that answer. My other question is, I have a few questions for you, but I'm trying to prioritize them. Steve and I have seen these videos of officers in NYPD today, and I'm just trying to get your opinion on this from an old school copper. There have been videos, and I'm sure you've seen them, where coppers have been in fights on the street, and the partner officer is just kind of being real lackadaisical about it, not getting involved and jumping on the radio and not really getting in the mix with it. What's your take on that? Have you seen those videos?
Yeah, I have. I saw a lot of those. And then I also saw a lot of the cops getting doused with water and all that kind of nonsense, and that's the shame. And that's really part of training, because what happens is that, I always went back to, I did an article on aggressive patrol versus non-aggressive patrol, and doers and watchers. Some of the cops are doers, the tougher guys, and those are the guys who, they rip people to the ground, they make the arrest. Somebody looks at them crooked, they collar them up, that kind of a situation, and they're always hunting for guns and collars and everything else. And those are your tough guys. And then you have the other guys who don't. And that separation, although it might be a little bit unfair, the aggressive against the unaggressive cop, but the idea is because with less crime out there, less things going on, more of a community service kind of a situation, when you encounter those things, they go into a little bit of shock. It's because of training. They're young. They're improperly trained. And they just have to know, if you have to walk away, it's not the worst thing. My feeling, this is only my personal feeling. Just go back up a little bit. It's okay. Grab your partner, whatever it is, but that radio is your lifeline. You got guys out there that are chomping at the bit. You tell them you need an 85, you need some help. Get the words out of your mouth. And then when the tough guys come, maybe you're a little young and, you're getting wrestled, whatever the situation might be. The tough guys will handle it. And some of the cops, they're just not, I don't want to say not tough enough. They're just not trained enough to roll them over and get in there and help cuff. It happens. But I got to tell you, it happens very, very, very rarely does it happen. It's not something that's rampant. It's just that the cameras out there they get hold of those kind of things, and then it goes all over social media. But there are so many young people out there today and mature guys that are kicking ass out there. NYPD, all over the place. I mean, we have websites, a few of them, Valor, Beyond the Line of Duty, and Valor, Police Valor. It's an NYPD site, and they show guns. They're taking, dozens and dozens of guns off the streets every day, some good collars. The cops are getting into shootings, and they're doing a good job. It just so happens that so many people with cell phones out there, those are the ones that make social media where maybe the cop didn't take proper action, maybe just not, I always, it falls back on the supervisors. I'm sorry to say, and I was one of them. You got to just make sure you're there on every job. Tell your people to call you right away, quick, and you better be there. I mean, I had some COs, some precinct commanders. He wanted you on every job. Every single job, every gun run, you run from one to the next to the next. You better be there when the shit goes down. So when the sergeant's there, you take charge and you help them. And as soon as you see a little bit of a crowd, you put give me some assistance, give me some backup, and you put it over your radio or whatever your code might be. And the cars will come running, and let them do it for you, And then I always told the young people back then, and the young people that I may do some help out today, I says, when the radio cars show up, just point them out. Him, her, and you point them all out and start taking them. And those are your collars. Those are your arrests. And you see them, what they did to the officers, who they went back into the crowd, or whatever the situation might be. But it's unfortunate, and I feel bad for the young people today. But I want you to understand, and I know firsthand, that is not the way it is 99.9% of the time. The cops are tough. They're tough young people out there, and they are doing the job.
Well, as an old school watch commander, what would you do today if a coppers came into your station and they're just drenched in water?
Of course, what every boss would do, let's go back out, change your clothes, and let's go back out again.
Yeah.
And you come point them out, and they got to go. I mean, they got to fucking go. It's going. Whether it's today or tomorrow. I mean, I don't care, today, tomorrow, next week, and you put down on your report, of course, that we used to complaint report, the crime report. It's a crime, of course. And you fill it out, and 3 male whites did this to me, or 3 male blacks, or 3 Spanish, or 11 of them so-and-so. And I don't care when it is. They have to be schooled. I want them in. And they do. You have a lot of investigative detectives. They go back and they get them. You don't hear a lot about that, of course. Mm-hmm. But those cops that are involved, and they're on TV and on the social media, they're called upstairs. They're called to the squad rooms. Let's sit down and we talk. Let's pick them out. And they go back and get them, but you don't hear about that, that you got them. But that would be my answer to it. Like we always say, everybody goes one way or another. You got to go. And those are the people, and you go and you take them. And you do what you got to do with them, and whether it's a summons, a disorderly conduct, obstructing government administration, whatever it might be, harassment to the officers, whatever, assault, of course, assault, and they get away on you. And these things do happen. Believe me, I've been involved in enough incidents where you put a group of people against a wall, and there's 2 or 3 of you or 4 of you, and you got 20 people. Well, you got them at gunpoint. And their hands are up against the wall, and then they start peeling off on you. They start running, one on one end, one on the other. And they go. Then another one goes. Now, what do? You start beating them all up. You got your gun in your hand. You're going to shoot them, and you don't know if they got weapons or not. So with these things, police work, I always said, is ugly work. Nobody wants to get collared. Nobody wants to get arrested. These people know if they run, they get away. A lot of the times they get away. And I never wanted my guys to try not to get separated when we were doing our jumps, our collars and such. But so they know that. And it's not so easy. And to collar somebody, you see a big guy, he doesn't want to get collared. 5 cops are rolling around with one guy trying to cuff him. It's the way it is. It's ugly, But one way or another, you got to get him to go. And you do it as quick as you can without making it too explosive, a community incident if you can't. And my thing, we did boxing and the use of the nightstick and everything else when we learned we were young people. And I'm sure they're doing the same thing with the batons and the special batons. My thing always was, you got to be a good wrestler. You got to wrestle these people to the ground and cuff them. That's your deal. Wrestle them, cuff them, and then make sure you get the gun,
Man,
Hey,
that
Steve.
would be such a good part too, Ken. If there was the cops with their heads down getting water poured on them, then NYPD made their own video. Then this happened.
That would
And
be good.
Just a cop righteously smacking the hell out of them. Oh,
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
he's so good.
I just, my personal opinion is, if the cops said, "Hey, I need a backup here. I'm getting doused with water," and the cops came in force, and just Donnybrook happened, I wouldn't have a problem with that at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's very, very true. And today it's because crime is really down, and a lot of it is hangout young people, especially young people maybe in the minority communities. So they're hanging out, having a good time, and they size you up pretty good. I know where you guys came. You see most of the officers, they have the medals above their shields, above their badges, right? And in New York, they do. I'm sure around the country a lot of them do as well. And they size up the cops pretty well. And they can see behind his shield, the backing plate where the medals go. They see that they don't see anything there. He has no medals. So when they see a cop he's got medals, and so he might be on foot patrol, they usually leave them alone. He looks a little more matured, and the word is, don't fuck with that guy, because he's going to take us. He's going to call for help, or he's going to beat us up himself, or he's going to shoot us. So their mind, this guy's going to he's going to kill us. This guy's a killer. Especially a lot of the young people, they say, no, watch this one. But you get a guy who's a kid, a young cop, maybe a young female officer, unfortunately, or maybe a young police officer, and he looks a little green, and he's walking his foot post. You can tell he doesn't have any medals. He's not a tough, doesn't appear to be that tough, and you sort of test him a little bit, and maybe you can make a few jokes and stuff like that about him, and so they sort of feel you out, and it's a shame, and it's a little bit of a problem, but I don't want you to think that that's so prevalent today. It's not. It is not prevalent today. It's not like that. It's just in a handful of cases,
Yeah, they can. You got to get your street cred. I used to work with a guy that worked in Kingston, New York, which is a smaller city, but still a city. And he said, "Oh
yeah, it's busy."
Yeah, he said it was like that there. He said when you were new, you kind of, when someone tested you, you kind of had to hammer them, because otherwise it's just going to make your career terrible. They kind of had to know that you handled your business. And he would go to projects, he said, and you might be going into a project for a domestic or something, and a gallon of piss would come out of the 5th floor and explode on the sidewalk, and it's like, man, no thanks.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. That's and like you says, and years back, what it was, they not only threw the bricks and things off and a lot of times they would wait till you get away from the radio cars, because they didn't want to get charged with murder, and they used to hit the radio cars with cinder blocks. And they used to smash the radio cards from 4, 5, 6 stories up.
That's gonna leave.
And then we had we had to lock up as many people as you can when you got caught in that situation. But then after it was all over, we had to go up on the rooftops and do roof patrol to clean off the rooftops of all the bricks and throw them down into the alleyways, because they would bring them up there and have them all lined up. So when the police would come through, they'd hit them with bricks and cinder blocks and shit like that. And of course, you get shots coming off the roof. And it was always that stuff years back. But in today, too. Today, it's the same situation. A different level, though, of course.
Yeah. Well, geez, a brick will kill you just as quick as a bullet if it hits you in the head. It's silent.
Oh, yeah.
That's scary,
Yep.
man. Peter, do you have?
Yep.
We have a lot of listeners who are younger folks getting into the career. Do you have some advice you could impart on them?
Yeah, I have to tell you, and I talk to people all the time, and I would say, when you're going to come on the job, if you're a civilian, you're a youngster, you're in school, high school or college or something like that, you try to keep yourself as clean as you can. Nobody's perfect. You're going to get into trouble. You're going to get into trouble in high school, driving and stuff like that. I had summonses all the time when I used to race around in my hot rods when I grew up. I had long hair, back in the 50s and such. And so what it was is that I tell them, try to do the best you can to stay out of trouble. Know when to walk away. I said, that's not for me, man. This is not my gig. I don't want no part of that. So I try to tell them, if you're thinking of law enforcement or any career, try to stay out of trouble. And the question is, can you do it? Can you stay out of trouble? And that's the question you have to send to. Are you good enough? And of course, you always come with something. When you go for your investigation, there's always something. When they do the investigation, they check your school teachers, your neighbors. So maybe some of you strayed a little bit. Maybe you used foul language. Maybe you got in trouble in school a little bit. Your bad driving record. And maybe you got pushed around by the police. It's on a juvie record or something like that. That's not going to disqualify you from the job. And I tell them, try not to lie, not too much anyway. When you do your investigation, now I think today they got lie detector tests, they got all this shit there. So if you had some drinks, that's it. But you don't want to tell me you love to drink. He says, it really wasn't my gig. I said I've tried drinks, of course, and then it comes to that thing with marijuana, with weed. Of course, if you say cocaine or something, you're done. But if you saying about marijuana. You're trying to talk about the use of, smoking a joint or something like that. So if they're going to get you on a polygraph, they said that could be a problem, So you got to know what they'll accept and what they don't accept, So if you think they're going to take you were in college, you tried marijuana, If you try cocaine, you're done. So you might as well just lie or something. If you try coca-dope, you're done. But if you're going to say you had a joint of marijuana, it really wasn't for me, but we're at a party, peer pressure, I apologize for it, but I took a joint. Well, they're going to tell you right away, they're going to come back at you and say, does that mean when you come on the police department and you see corruption and you're going to go along with it, or you're going to report it? That kind of a situation. So, you're not going to be perfect, but I tell them, try to be as clean and as physically fit as you can. Now, if you want to do something else in your life that's not going to bar you from getting that job, know what the qualifications are and try to keep yourself, in line for the job you're looking for, not just law enforcement,
Absolutely. Great advice, Peter. Thank you. And I wanted to ask you, your latest project you have going on right now, the Harlem Raiders. Can you talk about that a little bit, where people can get it and what it's all about?
Yep, Harlem Raiders. It's based on my true story, my narcotics team up in the Central Harlem, up in the 32nd Precinct, and it's we were one of the first diverse teams in New York City history that worked, I should say. And it's about the team. We nicknamed the Harlem Raiders. And we went out and we wound up making about 8,000 arrests. We took thousands of guns and tons of narcotics. And we did all sorts of different kinds of enforcements, observations, arrests, and street, stop and frisk sort of things, stop, question, and frisk. We made a lot of those kinds of collars. We pinpointed narcotic-prone locations. And we kicked ass for back in the day. We really, and we worked hard. And we accomplished something, and the book highlights that. And I was fortunate enough that I had the opportunity to really had a bunch of good, tough cops, and they were tough guys. A lot of military guys, ex-military, and such, and they just were a good bunch of people. Now, we also the thing to it, our twist on it was that we work with community leaders. And I had one really in particular, Rita Smith. But we work with a lot of community leaders, and the community loved us. And you cannot go into any community, especially a minority community, and if you got a majority of a white police department or any police department, go in and start taking people off the street, kicking in doors. You need community support. And we had that. The community cheered. And this was back in the day when there was, race was a big deal. It was, it was black and white, and it was police against the community. We broke down those barriers, and I had a good time. We went to all the community meetings. We worked hard. That's all it was that just hard work. We were no different than anybody else. And we accomplished something. We cleaned up a big piece of Central Harlem, eliminated the narcotics, got the mafia out of there with the help of the DEA. And that's what the book is in there. I got some good DEA undercovers in there, and they backed us up. And so the story is about that. It's the Harlem Raiders. It's about what we did back in the day. And it relates to today. As a matter of fact, the very beginning of the book talks about the heroin that comes from Mexico, and a couple of Harlem High School cheerleaders overdosed and died on a rooftop. And that's how the story kicks off. And then an old crippled DEA agent who got shot, and it's in the book, I don't want to give it all away, but tells the story at a school assembly about this team of people, my team, and what we did back in the day. And it's a good story. It's a fun read. It's a quick read. It's a rah-rah. It's a good police and community story. It's a story of diversity, hope, freedom for a community. And I think it's apropos today in getting the police departments to work with their community, but kick ass where necessary. Take action, clean up the community. Like Chicago, God, I wish I could go to Chicago and help them out with all the shootings they got. It's like Harlem and the New York City back in the old days, and you just got to take control of those streets. Got to pay the overtime. I don't care if you got to begin the National Guard. I don't care, but you can't have them hanging out, and you got to take away their guns. So you got to set up checkpoints. You got to target areas. You find that, oh my God, it's only a couple mile area. What's the bad area? Well, then that's the area you got to target and clean it up. So that's essentially, I hope the Harlem Raiders is a book that the police will look into, community people, and it's doing very well. It's well received. The views are great. We're keeping our fingers crossed. Some of the movie film companies, I don't want to mention them today, they're looking at it. So we're saying our prayers that it comes into a streaming service on TV or a movie when all this stuff, the virus stuff blows over. So we're hoping for that,
Wow, sounds great, man. Where can people get it, and where can people reach you at?
Okay, you can get the book it's everywhere. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's Target, it's Walmart. So if you just put in Harlem Raiders, it's going to pop all over the place. Anywhere you can get it. And then you'll see when you put in Harlem Raiders, my name, Peter Pranzo, will come up. Or you can put in my name, Peter Pranzo, and you'll see, just Google my name and the book will come up. My other books, Behind the Shield, The Journey Through the NYPD, that's my first book, and that's a true account of my career. There's a stress management book that I wrote for Gould Publications, as a matter of fact.
All right.
Cool.
For Jeff Gould. Yeah. It's Jeff Gould and the Gould family had all the law enforcement books, and they asked me to write that book. It's on stress management for law enforcement, and it's a suicide preventative. That's on Amazon and all the books, all the book companies as well. And so they can reach it anywhere there, on everywhere books are sold. And I promise you, it's a good read. It's a fun read, and you'll get goosebumps, and you'll rah, rah, rah. It's police and community winning over the bad